Hello, everyone. We're live with another special guest. We've got Jordan Weisman here, who's a game designer, author, and serial entrepreneur, as they say on the internet, which I've found hilarious in in such a way of putting that. We also here,
You
as
don't
always,
eat
have
cereal?
what was that, Jordan?
You don't eat cereal? I mean, come on. Cereal entrepreneurs are at the center of our breakfasts.
It's the start of every day, except for Daniel and mine, apparently. Just roll out of bed straight on the desk.
Well,
Um,
you have a more frequently used line about being a serial entrepreneur.
Yes, I often say that the difference between serial entrepreneurs and serial murderers is there's more corpses in our wakes.
um,
I've thrown you off. We're off to a good start.
we also have Sean and Daniel here who have kindly stepped out of tech to join us as well. How are we all?
Uh, this is a very Jordan-like experience. Jordan, we're literally in tech. Like, I was 2 minutes late because we were doing the bit where she falls backwards and splatters guacamole over herself and try to line it up with the camera. And so we had to splatter some guacamole a couple of times and work out how the audio mic was going to work with that as well.
Yep.
And here we are. And it's sort of a metaphor for a lot that we've done.
Is that why?
Splattering guacamole is pretty much a good metaphor for most of what we've done. Absolutely.
So that's why Jess was messaging me asking me for a broom.
Yes.
You spilled it
Very,
everywhere,
very
didn't you?
So to do a brief thing, to talk a little bit about Jordan and why I'm so happy to have him on here. Jordan's got a long history with theater and a deep love of theatrical things. He is also in the Game Designers Hall of Fame and has been making games that revolve around story for a really long time. Jordan was doing networked games when you had to dial up with 300 baud modems. Jordan was making VR installations in shopping malls in the early 90s. He is always ahead of his time. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it's a terrible idea.
Yes.
Jordan and I met because I got involved in one of his madcap schemes when he was came up with the idea that we now call ARGs, or alternate reality games. So Jordan is the guy who came up with that form of, if you will, online distributed theater story thing.
Yeah. Giant collaborative storytelling / scavenger hunt. Yeah.
So because there's so many places to start, and I don't know where is better than any other, let's talk a little bit about that, because the idea for ARGs came from a place no one would necessarily expect. Do you want to talk about the background for that?
Sure. So actually, it overlaps with gaming too, because they both came in the same place in my life, which was at a summer camp up in northern Wisconsin, where I was a junior counselor. And one of the older counselors, a fantastic guy, legendary in my life and in the industries of entertainment and venture capital overall, a guy named Steve Arnold. He was the program director for the camp. And about, I don't know, 10 years older than I am. And so he was regaling me with his investigations. This is early 70s, into what was called the Beatles Mystery, which was this premise that John had woven into all of the music and the publicity and the album art, this kind of hidden mystery that you could solve. And if you did, you would be escorted off to Octopus's Garden and live in luxury for the rest of your life. And that whole concept of this hidden story, and which there's absolutely there's simultaneously zero evidence and an enormous amount of evidence for that the Beatles did was just stuck with me. I always just thought that was a super cool way of engaging an audience. And I thought, in the age of the internet, because when they did it, there was no collaboration. Everybody had to do it on their own, right? And when he would tell me the times he would run into an individual in his life who was also following this, and they would talk for hours, right? But with the advent of the internet, I realized that kind of could take a next step, right? That we were organically forming communities around passions, and that if we could kind of inspire people to want to decode or solve these stories as a collaborative effort, it would form a community. And the premise was we would create what I called the hive mind, right? This entity that I believed would be able to solve anything. And it was, from a game design standpoint, quite different, because you're used to trying to challenging an individual mind, an individual player's creativity and their skills. And here you were trying to basically you were playing with a godlike entity. I mean, that could do anything. And it was a very different animal, as you well remember.
Yes, I do.
But that summer camp is also where I ran into D&D, because Dungeons and Dragons was published in Lake Geneva, about 4 hours away. And the year it came out, one of the older counselors who was in college at the time, I was in high school, brought a copy of the game with him to camp. And we started playing. And that was quite literally a life-changing event for me. After I went home, packed up my friends, we drove back to Lake Geneva to go buy copies of the game, because there was one store in the world you could buy it from, and that was Gary Gygax's house, with the bottom level of which had been converted into a store. And so we roll in with 6 of my high school friends, and Dave Arneson is manning the store, because it was either Dave or Gary. There were only 2 employees of TSR at the time. And we had a relatively big purchase. It was 6 copies. That was a big deal. So Dave says, "Hey, well, if you got time, I'll run you on an adventure," and we're like, "Yeah, of course." So we go into the kitchen, and they had converted the kitchen to have this table that ran between the breakfast nook and the kitchen. And so we sat in the breakfast nook, and he sat in the kitchen, and there was a screen that separated him from us, kind of like a bank teller screen, little holes in it. So you couldn't see him, but you could hear him, And then, like a bank teller, there was a little hole cut out down at the table level, right? And Dave had a great voice. And so every once in a while, this hand would emerge and dice would drop, and he would say, "Roll these." Anyway, it was a fantastic experience. He killed us all within a couple hours with rats, not the giant ones, just the little ones. That's how minor characters we were. But it was a spectacular first D&D experience for my friends who had never played before, and made us all lifelong addicts. And luckily, later in life, I got to work closely with Dave, and he became a great friend. I worked with Gary on several projects as well. But that was it was a spectacular introduction to a form of entertainment that would indeed change my life.
And in our own small way, I mean, I think that the evolution of the tabletop RPG into ARGs, alternate reality games, where you're playing with that distributed collective, but it is very much the similar kind of storytelling, but played at that kind of scale. I think that was a distinctive contribution to what we understand to be either games or theater or story or something, whatever you call that damn thing. It's it's not a whole house, but it's a brick in the house.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that I think that that melting pot that you refer to, that role playing games and ARG games and live action role playing games and escape rooms and VR experiences, they all fall in this kind of melting pot between game, story, interactive narrative, social experience, right? And all of those things are brought together into this very rich stew. which is what makes it so special, right? I mean, I said, what makes role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games so special is it's the people at the table, right? It's that shared social experience. It's not the way the dice are rolled. It's not any of those kind of things. Those are all just props. They're props to get you into that common interactive narrative space and a theatrical mindset, right? I mean, we know most people don't stand up and act at them, but yet they are, right? In their mind, these movies, these plays, these, they're running at, as we were referring to earlier, the infinite resolution renderer. I mean, they are vivid, right? And I get together with friends now 40 years later, and yeah, those memories from those experiences are every bit as fleshed out and vivid as real life experiences.
I don't know if you'll remember this at all, but a very early conversation that we had, you said something that may have just been a passing note to you, but it was 2001. So this is a long time ago. Bensley and Daniel were probably 6 years from being born. I don't know.
2.
It was a long time.
2.
And we were talking about everything or nothing or whatever. And you mentioned in passing when I first met Jordan, he was the head of the head of games at Xbox.
Creative director for
sorry.
games at Xbox. Yeah.
From an artist's point of view, the head of games. I understand.
Okay.
I understand from a management perspective, that's not quite how that works. But creative director at Xbox Games. That's right. You said to me, "Did you know this year sales of video games are down in Japan for the first time in history?" And I said, "Why?" And you said, "They've been outcompeted by superior entertainment product." And I said, "What?" And you said, "The cell phone. You can't make something more entertaining for a teenager than another teenager." And I thought of that listening to you talk about what's really important about the people around the table. And I think that, I often, one of my set pieces, since we're now both old and we both have set pieces, so one of my set pieces about the ARGs, the alternate reality games, is at the end of all the big ones, I've been invited to at least one wedding.
Yep.
Which is another metric that is solving for, oh my God, the people you meet and the connections you forge are really, really strong. So one of the things that I learned on that first ARG with you on the Beast for Spielberg's AI was watching the intensity with which the audience related to itself. So one of the things, to curtsy very briefly in the direction of our show, I built a play to be performed on Twitch precisely because I didn't think it would be all that interesting that I knew how to write something that would be interesting just as video on your screen, but not TV. Mm-hmm. But if I got the chat channel next to it, and I tried to build a lot of ways so the audience would have the experience in the chat channel of my play that the audience of an ARG has when they're putting together an ARG, yeah. I know that is fun. So I think one of the things that people who know theater but are not part of sort of that world of like streamed gaming or whatnot will be surprised by is how much of the entertainment is provided by you, by the audience talking to yourselves.
Well, and to me, it's a key differentiator between theater and film, right? I mean, theater has always been a symbiotic relationship with the audience, right? And theater to an empty house is dead, right? It just, you when you're on stage, you thrive on that energy, right? You're a sponge and you absorb it and you reflect it back. And, that's why it's a fundamentally different type of acting than being in front of a camera, right? And so I think, your insight to that, what makes it theater is not just that it's live, but it has that dynamic that of interaction with the audience during the performance is what makes it theater rather than live television.
Yeah, exactly. I I wrote a little blog post yesterday asserting the hot take of the week that theater has a chance to leapfrog back over film as a dramatic format of cultural centrality in the 21st century. And my argument being basically, in the 20th century, film won because film could scale. You build it once and you sell 1 million tickets and you just can't compete with that. But on a live platform, like a Facebook Live or a Twitch, you can scale live theater way, 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 way up. You can put more people live watching something on Twitch than can fit in every seat in every Cineplex in the world. So you can make back a lot of that. And one thing that film is crappy at is responsiveness. Like if you spend an enormous amount of money, you can make something like Bandersnatch, which is like cool for what it is, but it's just not what cinema likes to do. Whereas theater, I think, is you can get a good actor who will be relating to an audience, and that guy will be making $14 an hour as a waiter at Red Lobster. Like it's a really inexpensive, very, very high quality form of interaction.
Well, yeah, I mean, this feeds into one of my old tropes, which you've heard, I'm sure, in the past as well, which is that we're completing the circle, right? I mean, when we started storytelling, it was immediate. It was social. It was, around the campfire talking about the dinosaur that got away, right? And you had that, immediacy of the storytelling to the audience. You could modify the stories you went, to play to the room, right? And we went through a series, several thousand year series of codification and mass distribution, right? With each stage, reducing the show to more and more codification, right? You went to live theater, you still had the audience, but then you went to the written word and publication of books and less than no immediate response. And then you went to, film and radio and distribution of smaller and smaller number of people participating in creation and larger and larger number of people consuming, right? And the feedback loops were broken, right? They were very, very slow and expressed only in one way, which was monetarily,
Right.
And I think that as we got into this, century and the tail end of the last, where we start being able to have real-time experiences and have that immediate feedback loop, I agree. We're closing that loop. That's what, everything from kind of, shows being done in inside of virtual worlds, right? And those, and to Twitch, to even kind of the immediacy of social media, right, creates that much tighter loop, more similar to that campfire on giant scales. Now, I still think there are some very key things we have to figure out, right? You can read the faces of the 10 people around the fire. You can feel the energy of the several hundred people or 1,000 people in the theater in front of you, right? Neither of those things happen well when I've got 10,000 people on Twitch trying to give me feedback, and a stream of typed feedback. I can't, as a performer, you can't, or even a director, you can't absorb that and reflect it. So I think we have some tools that we have to build to be able to aggregate that energy and that feedback in a way that's actually consumable by, directors and performers and tech in real time. And
There's
I think
actually
starting that,
There's actually a plugin in Twitch that will aggregate and multiply emojis and bubble them up. So
Yes.
When a lot of people type in a laugh, then you can watch and see laughter bubbles rising.
Yeah. We've been playing with that on our Twitch channel over the last couple of years, and it's absolutely the beginning of the kind of tool that I'm talking about. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
To your point about the history of storytelling, because I'm given to over cute metaphors, I gave a talk years ago now called Storytelling 5. And it basically said the history of storytelling there have been 5 innovations. One is bards. The second is theater or parallel bards.
Mm-hmm.
The third is the printing press, which is scalable Bard. Movies are scalable parallel Bards. Those are your first four.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're at moment 5, in which we have those scalable parallel Bards on both sides, facing off.
Yeah.
So I've often thought in pick your number, 100,000, 30,000, 10,000, whether you count, I think drama clearly precedes the written word. Let's say 50,000 years, that 50 to 100,000 years since we got rid of the last of the Neanderthals and it was just sapiens all the way down. In that time, if you think storytelling has changed 5 times and we're in one of those moments right now, what an incredible privilege to be part of that.
No, I think that I like that. I like that very much. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
So,
and enormous opportunities to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Because that's what any kind of inflection point, that's what we're going to do, right? I always used to say, that all communication technologies are invented for the transmission of pornographic images, and then other uses are eventually found. I mean, and we are in a world where we are thankfully post-pornographic in terms of the use of this technology, and I think we're now learning more and more about how to use it in a way that is truly constructive.
To go with our theory of prehistory and events on geological timescales, a giant meteor just descended from the heavens and basically obliterated theater as we know it. One of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on in the era of COVID was you are a guy doing a lot of things, I think, or I speculate, where the skills that people are learning at a place like NIDA or other colleges like them, whether they be front of camera or back of camera, you're a guy who's making stuff where that. Do you think there is any point to the 3 years these guys have just put themselves through?
Yes, I actually think that education in theater and the dramatic arts is enormously useful and transferable to almost any career you wish to take. As we said many times already, right? Interpersonal communication, right? Being able to express yourself to other individuals and to groups of other individuals in a way that is compelling is like the secret sauce, right? It is whether you're, just trying to sell your proposal into your boss and your peers, whether you're trying to raise money and start a company, whether you're, whether you're just trying to motivate your church to do something positive for the community. When you're trying to impact the world in any way, you have to do it through people. And theater is the tool set to engage and motivate people. And so whatever career you choose, I think that this skill set is enormously valuable. And that's true for all of the back of house stuff as well, because it's all a magic show, right? And yes, being able to stand in front of the stage and say the words is part of the magic show, but it's only half the show, right? Understanding all of the pieces it took to get there, to build the mood, to build the setting, to create, the environment to where those words were going to be well received is also part of the skills and all going to be super valuable. Now, in entertainment, right, we find those skills useful in everything from video game development to, things that are more direct parallels like escape rooms or theme parks, or even taking those same skills and bring them into virtual spaces, right? I mean, like some of the best, lighting teams I've seen in video games are people who came out of theatrical lighting schools, right? Because they understand the craft, right? The tool of a virtual light is pretty easy to pick up. The understanding of how to use light is not, right? And it's true on everything from set decoration being moved into virtual set decoration, or any children's book illustration. There's just an enormous amount of breadth that these skills can apply to. So yeah, I don't think there's been time wasted. I also think that we've had that impact from that meteor and the dust is in the air, but the dust will clear, right? It will be a couple of years and the dust will clear. If we look at 1918 as any kind of historical precedent, look at the years of explosive growth of Hollywood. They were right after the pandemic, right? As soon as people can, they go back out and they engage in social theatrical experiences, right? Because it's who we are. It's part of our species. And so it is going to clear the landscape. A lot of good people will be out of work for a while. A lot of great institutions will be very challenged, but the art and the craft is not going away. It will just be reborn in different ways within a very short period of time.
I'm always struck whenever, at any point when someone says art is dead, I was like, dude, art's the groundwater. Like, your particular thing might be going away. What you meant when you said the word, will there be the demand for operatic arias that there were 200 years ago? Maybe not. But art keeps rolling, and she will crush wine out of those of us who sign up to be grapes, in any circumstance.
Yes, very, very true. And yes, if you're going to be an artistic, expect to be crushed for wine. That's a great metaphor.
Yes, the shapely bare foot of the muse is always descending.
Yes, in my mind, I just see the opening of Monty Python, but it's the same thing.
So from where we are now, one of the things that feels directly applicable to things that I see Bensley and Daniel working on and the rest of the crew, that was unexpected to me. Like, for one of the difficulties with alternate reality games is, what's the business model? If you want to make something that is not someone's marketing budget, then how do you monetize it? Will people pay for tickets? And I thought about that a reasonable amount, although probably not with the sharpest business mind. But I remember 2 or 3 years ago suddenly having that eureka insight was, oh my God, escape rooms are the business model that the Instinct to ARG found. Like, collective problem solving set inside a narrative context, which I never would have thought of. Someone said, 6 people, $30 an hour, we're done. And for some reason that worked. And I would never have predicted that. But there it is. And now it's a thing. How do you think that the escape rooms will speciate so that they will become more story-based, more theater-based? Or do you think that they're locked into very much sort of a puzzle time race format?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all. I think that they already have. I think, ARGs and broader transmedia. Because, we pivoted off of the first ARG to use an old economic model for transmedia with the Kathy's book trilogy.
Right.
And that probably more directly than ARGs influenced, I think, things like escape rooms and these kinds of interactive narrative experiences. And I think that we see that very broadly, right now in theater, right? If you look at experiences like Sleep No More and many other kinds of kind of dynamic interactive theater experiences where it's about the immersion and the solution if you will, is not as important as the journey. You know,
Right.
Solution is part of it, but not like you don't feel unsatisfied if you didn't like figure it all out, right? Another example that would be
Slightly unsatisfied. Would have liked to figure out a little more about Sleep No More, but yes.
You and I are exactly on the same page there. To me, it's like it's that and Alias. It's kind of like you have to have closure someplace. I mean, I was the crashed plane. What was that one?
Yes, Lost.
Lost. Yeah. So it's like
Yeah.
Lost and Sleep No More. It's like, okay, people, closure. We like closure. Just give us some, a little bit, not all of it. Anyway. But even if you look at things like Meow Wolf, right? Meow Wolf and the kind of immersive experiences that have, kind of discovered narrative throughout them. I mean, I think that these are all kinds of flexing of those muscles. And I think it's going to continue to evolve in lots of interesting ways.
It's true that I saw a student project at USC that was a sort of pocket discovered narrative half escape room thing that was actually explicitly inspired by Kathy's book. Now that you tell me, I remember that. I had the very strange experience of being at the Immersive Design Summit last year and having a young woman who is a professional in the industry come up and say, that book was so important to me when I was 12. And I was like, whew, wow. Yes. Is it just me or is it getting old in here?
Compliment and insult simultaneously. Yes.
So I know one of the things that you have a constant in to do, which is another para-theatrical thing, is over the years, you usually have some version of themed restaurant or equivalent sort of physical space that's story rich, but also serves some sort of purpose. Obviously,
that's a space of my wife and I, my wife has been a creative director and art director with me on many of our projects, and it's a space we really love to play in. I mean, we did a 4-year stint at Imagineering working on interactive experiences for the theme parks and the resorts and the restaurants and the cruise ships and stuff. We love physical spaces because we love the dynamics that happens when people get together, and pretty much, going on over 40 years of the career now. And it's really the same 3 legs of the stool in every project. It's socialization, it's storytelling, and it's mechanics that serve the purpose of socialization and storytelling, right? And every project, whether it's been virtual reality centers or theme parks or board games or whatever it is, Twitch channels or escape rooms, it's those same 3 legs looking for that space, looking for new solutions and new attempts at mixing those together. And I think restaurants are ones that it's a really fun challenge. I mean, they're such, food is another great social medium, right? And being able to weave story and food together, I think is a really fun challenge.
The Friday, yes. Whenever I'm talking to these guys, I have to check and make sure, is my Friday their Friday? But in this case, it is. Next Friday, we're going to have Andy Lanning, who's a comic book guy who is one of the creators of Guardians of the Galaxy and the Kingsman, but also worked with me at Magic Leap and was part of a project that Lou Doy, if you remember, guys, was talking about food-based, an experience where you encountered a character who took you through sort of a tasting journey, which was also a journey about childhood memory that also used the Magic Leap to sort of wind some magic into that. It was a beautiful little piece that they were building, which then COVID, but that that is the world. You said something that I did not know, or we've worked together a lot now, so I recognize those those legs of the stool. The virtual reality centers, did you actually have some form of socialization? Because I always think of that as you're sitting alone by yourself in an egg. Like it's the problem with VR, right? Is I put a bucket on my head and I'm not with anyone.
Yeah, no, that was one of the key things for us was to build it into a social experience. And that it was well, let's see, you know, good artists borrow and great artists steal. So this was stolen directly from you know, from our observations of how Disney works when it's doing its job the best. So yeah, the way that the virtual world centers were designed is that you would come in and initially you would meet your teammates. If you hadn't brought a whole team, you would be put together with other teammates and you would meet your opponents and you would see that you would meet each other during this briefing and you would get your mission and so on. And typically during that, you know, you're trying to absorb the information about what you're going to do and how to control the vehicle and so on. And so, you know, it's not really, there's not a lot of social connection going on during that, right? And then everybody's put into their individual cockpits and you're off in the virtual environment and you are obviously engaging with each other, but there isn't personality associated with who you're engaging with. You're engaging with polygons that represent, you know, character vehicles inside that world. And you don't know, you really don't have a personality association. Now, if you brought friends with you, that transfers, right? I know Charlie's in the red, you know, in the red mech. And so when I arm off Charlie, that has a particular meaning to me. But it doesn't for strangers, right? But then the key element of the entire experience took place after the cockpits, because then the entire team, both teams, are brought together in a debriefing environment, and you watch a movie. The movie is one you just made, because we had invented all sorts of virtual cameras. It started as simply just dots moving around, but then it became over time into virtual cameras of all these great cinematography that we had worked out. And you saw the movie that you were now the star of. And that's what I always referred to as the bus crash moment, right? You're coming out of the cockpits and you're on an adrenaline high, right? And when our adrenaline is up, we need to talk. We need to talk to each other.
Perhaps truer of you and I than some, but yes.
But I think it's the reason I call it the bus crash moment is like you ride the bus to work every day and you never talk to the person next to you, but the bus gets in a small crash and you are talking to the next person. You're like,
yeah.
What did you see? Oh, are you okay? Did you care? You have this need to communicate. And so when you're brought back together in that post adrenaline experience, and now you see that the guy who came around the corner and shot you was Charlie, you're like, damn it, that was you. All right, hey, that was cool. How'd you get me? You know, it creates that bond. Right. And that post-show experience was the magic sauce of the entire centers, because it created closure, it created community and connection, and correspondingly also got you ramped up to go do it again. Right. So it also created that economic wheel of trying to go, well, now that we know each other, let's go do it again. You know, that kind of thing. So the social thing, I've always said that the software engineering was nowhere near as interesting or important as the social engineering even in those early virtual reality centers in the late 80s and early 90s.
So this is actually a lift of your idea from, I want to say, BattleTech, the dog fighting over modems, and your thought, wait, we can make a record of what you did. We can turn it into a story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where we pioneered this, right? We captured all the network events and then we wrote parsers that then took those network events and turned them into sentences, right? And we turned it into a story, and you went home with a printed story of your experience, right? And that was very much where we pioneered that. Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, it's all right. It's already gone, whatever it was.
There will always be more. I've thought of that countless times, and it's also, I'm glad to have this conversation with these guys here, that your CV says game guy, but it's always been story. There's always been story.
Yeah, great in my mind, great mechanics are invisible, right? It's like, for me, the difference between a Stephen Sondheim show where you go home singing the music and a, Lloyd Webber show where you go home singing the sets, right? and I'm sorry, that was wrong, right? The sets should not be the thing. Just like the game mechanics shouldn't be what a board game is different, right? But I'm saying in a role-playing game, it's not the mechanics. Or in any of these kind of social experiences, they should have invisibly supported the socialization and the storytelling, right? And if it's like if they surface, then it's like something's wrong, right? Because that's not the part that should have been the piece that you were so excited about. And as a young designer, you don't get that. I mean, it took me a long time to learn, because when you're young, it's like you want to show off how smart you are. And so you write all these crazy mechanics to illustrate that you've thought of fucking everything. And I've got a rule for everything. And it's like, eventually you realize, okay, yeah, you're not actually helping, that's you're not actually achieving that facilitation of the socialization and the storytelling. If indeed, you're just trying to prove how smart you are.
It is one of the things that I think, looking at alternate reality games, because we used, in the Beast, we had puzzle solving as a gate. Like, for those who do not know this format, very loosely speaking, imagine there's a story spread out across a whole bunch of websites and characters, and they're doing things, but every now and then you have to stop and work to get a little bit of the story. Like, you find a character, but they've got a password protected secret diary on their website. So you have to work out what the password is. And then when you get it, you get to read the secret diary. So the loop was story, some kind of gate, which was usually a puzzle, and then story, which has, a great history in gaming. Like, I'm spending a lot of time in the last couple of years working with Graham Devine, who made Seventh Guest, which is, one of the foundational puzzle story games. And Graham, is a whiz at actually so many things. I had a conversation with Graham the other day who was like, so it was annoying me, and the cost is high to go through the service, the other service. So I just wrote my own SLAM algorithm because I'm Graham and I do that. No, never, don't bother working it out, those of you in theater land. But the unwanted after effect with that is that a lot of people who went to make ARGs thought that the point of them was to put in really hard puzzles, rather than understanding the point is to make puzzles that feel hard, but in fact are just there to make your audience feel awesome when they solve them. They're not there to make you feel awesome when the audience doesn't solve them. And it seems like
exactly.
Like, I go to escape rooms, and I'm a dude in his 50s who's colorblind and doesn't see well in low light. So escape rooms are full of chances for me to feel stupid. And that's rarely something I want to pay for. Like, I feel like I can be made to feel stupid for free. But it's rarely something I seek out and wish to pay money to do.
It's the same mistake like young game masters make in role-playing games, which is, my job is to beat the players. It's like, well, no, you're God. There is no way the players beat you if you don't want them to, right? Your job is to challenge the players and then reward their creativity for defeating what you've established, Right. And it takes a certain maturity to understand that role,
I think the point of entertainment is, at some level, always to gloriously lose, right? Like, yes. It's the person on the other end. It's the audience who has the victory. And your point is to, you are the angel that Jacob needs to throw down. Otherwise, it's just, angel beats human. That's not news, right?
No, your job is to facilitate their joy, right? That's what you're being paid for, right? And that's I think that's what makes it so exciting, right? I mean, we all thrive in our own way off of the joy we generate in our audiences, right? Or we die, crash on the rocks when we don't generate that joy, both emotionally and financially.
Yes. Yes. Yes, one of the things that I've tried to say to every possible person I could about this play is, this is not intended as experimental theater. This is intended as funny. I come from the Bardic school, which is, if you are entertained, I eat. If you are not entertained, I do not eat. So no one should come to this play expecting, like, if they choose to find a way to feel challenged, great. Or if they choose to find a way to think about the future of theater, great. But if the only way you get anything out of this experience is by reading the little card at the bottom that tells you what it was supposed to mean, then we have done something terribly, terribly wrong.
Well, that's like, we were talking about Sleep No More. My folks are huge theater and opera fans, and so they went to an opera in LA called Hopscotch, right? And
based on the Cortazar novel, I betcha.
I don't know, but I'll assume you're right. You being much more sophisticated than I am.
It's a literary CYOA book that you construct in different. You can go in different orders, and it makes different stories.
Gotcha. Yeah. So in this one, they show up. They're put into a car, and there's a singer in the car, and they're driven to another location, and then they go into that location, and there's singers and then it's just and everybody's jumping all around LA in different order, and they were like, "That's wonderful. Now can you sell me the book so I understand even a little bit of what I just saw?"
Yeah.
So that's the little card at the bottom of the
work. Exactly. I think the equivalent was a friend of mine that I went to Sleep No More with, who came out and said, I guess if you'd said to me in advance that I'm going to charge you $160 to chase interpretive dance through the dark, I might have passed.
But I think, what's nice is it opens a window for different types of immersive theater, right? I look at, I can't remember the name of the group in London who does those incredible experiences around
Secret
film.
Cinema. Secret Cinema.
Yeah. I love their, because that's similar kind of total immersion into the cinematic experience and kind of creating a theatrical experience in which the cinematic experience is placed, and that kind of stuff.
Do you know they're still doing it? Secret Sofa.
Oh yeah?
It's the pandemic version. So Google around, like you in the audience after you've seen our show, look for Secret Sofa and Secret Cinema, because that is a very, very cool world.
Yes.
We have been talking a lot, which, happens. Daniel or Bensley, would you care to have a word in edgewise?
I just find it funny that once again I find myself on the stream as the only person who does not understand D&D at all.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to make it in the theater world not understanding D&D. You're going to have to fix this.
That's the conclusion I've kind of made.
There's basically no way.
I think Daniel's going to have to give me a crash course in D&D and just comedy. Jesus.
The two are synonymous. Don't worry.
In all fairness, Bensley, I'm pretty confident that neither Pippa nor Stephen from the Royal Shakespeare Company are D&D heads. I would have said, if I were guessing whether you were a better match for Pippa and Stephen or for me and Daniel, I would have guessed me and Daniel. But I sort of love the idea that 20 years from now, you'll be saying, I wish I could do your accent because it's so beautiful. But I'm just imagining you running Rigoletto, for the Vienna Opera House, because you'll have no truck with those D&D people and their immersive entertainment.
Look, I would have put myself with you and Daniel, and of course Jordan as well. But I'm fairly sure there's a lot of people out there who really love theatre who would be really, really scared if I ended up at a place like the Royal Shakespeare Company. That is when art would truly be dead.
I think that's pretty much what everybody who ends up there says. at
My
your age.
my question for you, Jordan, is so we've talked well a lot of the talk to begin with at least was with AR and that kind of stuff in the beginning, like kind of 2000s kind of, and then merging into into further things. Where do you see us going in this chaotic like, is there a path we're going in, or are we just like pinballing around and just like whatever comes?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's ever a path for entertainment, right? I think that there is, it is like the universe. It is always expanding in every direction simultaneously, driven by, just very different creative people with very different creative visions. And I think that's wonderful. And some of those directions and experiments will prove more popular than others, and they will start to appear as, historically it'll look like, oh, and then entertainment went that way. But no, it went every way simultaneously, and then the dollars went in a fewer number of areas. But I think that there is all sorts of interesting things going on at the moment. One place where both Sean and I are spending a lot of time and have been preparing for this for years is augmented reality as opposed to virtual reality. Or virtual reality, where we started back in the late 80s and 90s, is about escaping your current world into a completely artificial world, right? And augmented reality is about taking digital elements and overlaying them physically on top of your actual world, right? That opens up an enormous new spectrum of kinds of gameplay patterns, social interaction patterns, theatrical opportunities, where you could, for instance, do a theater show if your audience is all wearing AR glasses, where animated characters are on screen interacting with physical humans on screen simultaneously, right? You have that kind of complete ability to move these things together, and you have the opportunity to remove, thinking about tabletop games, a lot of the quote unquote drudgery of things in tabletop games, the tracking of things and the looking of things up and all that kind of good stuff. You end up with the Star Wars chess set, right? Where, you have that kind of interactive dynamics. So yeah, I think in terms of immersive entertainment, which is a place where, I'm Don and I and Sean are very focused on at the moment. I think there's a revolution coming in the kinds of things that we can do in physical spaces, and the kinds of stories we can tell, and how interactive and reflective of the audience they can be, is super exciting. Now, just as we've seen with every other form of communication technology, as powerful as it can be for good, it can be for bad, right? It can be for evil, because communication, unfortunately, is about the communication of ideas. And some of those ideas are constructive to society and others are destructive to society. And I don't know yet. I mean, we haven't figured out how to put the genie back in the bottle for the last wave of kind of communication tools that we created. And we're seeing its impact on our society in all sorts of negative ways at the moment. We have to be hopefully more conscious of that as we move into new technologies for communication, and try to figure out maybe a little earlier how we try to tilt the scale so that the positive communication is a stronger component than negative communication. But yeah, I think that there's all sorts. Entertainment is constantly in revolution, and I think that's what makes it's such an exciting field because of that.
I definitely think we're talking a lot about tabletop games. There's a game it's like $7 or something like that. You get a few packs with it, called Tabletop Simulator. And pretty much brings back all those old board games that you can't buy anymore or whatever, that fans have made from the ground up to go with this game. and you Discord in or Zoom in or whatever with your friends, no matter how far they are, and relive your tabletop game. I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And especially in, in today's environment with COVID, it's been a great way to connect with friends. Absolutely.
I do question though. You were talking about the 2001 era, which Daniel and I were 2 years old at that point. But my brother may or may not have been born at this point. We're not sure. It depends on what point. At that point, internet was not really good. In Australia, we might as well have just put smoke signals out. Realistically, we probably still could use smoke signals as a better form of communication than our internet in Australia. How the hell did you get like games? Because like we were through the dial-up age, the end of the dial-up age, as we came on. You'd sit there for ages just loading Google. How did how did you get that to work? How did you downscale the communications enough, but still had a fulfilling game to communicate with each other?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were great challenges. And I think one of the things, I think also theater is a good lesson in, which is cheat. Everything is a cheat, right? It's not what you actually do. It's what the audience thinks you did, right? It's all a magic trick. And that was very true of games in that day. It's true now as well, but I think those skills have atrophied because they haven't needed them, right? They have such raw processing power available in these machines. Like we had to think about how do we make something good look good with like 100 polygons, right? Or a small number of pixels, right? Back in the day. Nowadays, you don't care, right? You can just throw incredible amounts of processing power into your graphics. Similarly, you're not worried about trying to conserve bandwidth. And so those skills are atrophied and other skills are developed. But one of the key things that, again, right now is very used nowhere near as much, but back in the old days was super important, was something called the Predictor Corrector, right? So when we're doing a network game, because our bandwidth is so slow, we don't have the ability to report on where every person is in the game, instantly. So every copy of the game is running a predictor on where it thinks the other players have moved, right? And that's what it shows to you at whatever frames per second your computer is able to render. It shows the character having moved, let's say, due north, right? Because our simulation, our predictor of where you were going to move was pure north. Then a second or two later, it gets an update that actually you didn't move pure north. You actually moved kind of like at 20 degrees, right? So now we need to merge, where we showed you was to where you really are. And that would be the corrector. So we would then slowly count to merge those back together, which meant that no two players' games were actually the same, right? That every game is a merging of reality and prediction, of fiction and reality, constantly being woven back together. And it was kind of also a nice metaphor for what theater is altogether. And so, there were thousands of these kind of cheats back in the day. The first cockpits were built on an Amiga computer, which is this little tiny, home computer, our first virtual reality cockpits. And we built a custom graphics card, which had the ability to scale and rotate 2D bitmaps, which was a really big deal. The Amiga couldn't do that by itself. And then we made this giant memory card that was literally like almost a meter square. It was giant, like it was this big, and it held an unbelievable amount of memory, 16 megabytes.
For back then,
it got written up in all the IEEE magazines, 16 megabytes on one card. And what we did there, right, we pre-rendered all of the different angles on the different body parts and then would scale and assemble the piece. And then we cheated by making the mechs made out of the same pieces, right? You would assemble different mechs together to make different. Anyway, thousands and thousands of cheats. That's.
I mean, we still use them today. If you like, Daniel and I have been ventured into Fortnite a few times during this pandemic because we're just so bored, and why not? And because our internet is so bad, it's not unusual for us to drop out, and you see the character continue to run, but you know that person's no longer there because it's still predicting the last thing you were doing was you were going north.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah,
But
still.
Fortnite, I think Fortnite is a great example of modern theater, right? I mean, concerts and shows and stories, which have nothing to do with the game you're playing, right, are all being brought into that virtual environment. That's theater. You just brought theater to where the audience is, as opposed to try to get the audience to where the theater was.
Yeah. I guess my favorite comment in there was that now we don't have to worry about the bandwidth and the. I promise you, in Australia, we are very much keeping an eye on our bandwidth as we pipe. We have an off-site location. We're piping in 2 video streams, 2 audio streams, and then an audio stream back to them. And we loaded it up today, and everything was so digital and like crackling and all that. I was just like, alrighty, restart it all. Let's try again.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm sure that's true actually in a lot of places. I live in a place that has very good wiring because Microsoft, Google, Amazon, like they're all in the neighborhood, so wiring here is pretty good.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'm aware that it's just about the break time, and we will eventually need to get back to tech. But anything else you guys wanted to ask Jordan, or for that matter, Jordan, any finishing thoughts?
Well, Daniel hasn't piped up, so we got to put Daniel on the spot.
Oh, okay. Hello. Yeah, I think for a lot of the people that we've been talking to so far, Jordan, Bentley and I have been really interested to talk about strategies or advice for people coming from theater or kind of moving out into the world, especially having the meteor hit and kind of, I think a lot of people's trajectories, a lot of our friends, our peers at the moment are thinking, we have this background in live performance, but now we want to go digital, or we want to explore these kind of interactive storytelling environments. I was going to ask if, especially considering you have also come from a bit of a theater background, any advice or places to look, or we've kind of asked this question to most of the people that have come on and gotten some really good advice. So I was just hoping to build on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in my mind, for people coming out of theater schools, and for that matter, people coming out of art schools in general that are looking to try to get into various types of entertainment businesses or communication businesses, it's kind of a best of world, worst of world time, because you have incredible tools at your disposal, right? I mean, on your PC or your Mac is absolutely everything. Production studios that would have cost millions of dollars just a couple years ago live on your machines. Yeah. So that's incredibly powerful. That's the good world. The bad world is we expect you to use them, right? When you're out looking, and you want to get into whatever it is, whether it's, creating media, whether it's, wanting to get into a theater job, whatever it is, we're going to want to see a portfolio, right? If you profess to be passionate about something, then there should be evidence of your passion, and it should be in the production of works, right? And where I see a lot of people get hung up, and it's not just kids out of school, it's everybody, is they get super hung up on the quality, right? They're holding themselves in comparison to like Hollywood movies right? And we won't do that. We know you can't produce that. What we're looking for is the creative intent. We're looking for the creative problem solving, right? Not the production quality. Don't get yourself all hung up on, I can shoot it on my iPhone, but it's not going to look quite as good as if I had a red camera and did it. No one cares. Just show us what your passion's about in whatever creative form it can be, right? I mean, like, if you come out and, for instance, a bad example maybe, but you're in tech and you've got a degree in theatrical lighting, right? And you want to try to get a job in the video game business, right? Well, go break out your Legos, build a little environment, light it like fucking crazy, and show what you can do to create an environment with lights, right? You don't have to learn all the software yet, right? But just show how to use the tools, how to use the mindset that creates these incredible environments out of light. And that would be a great start, right? Now, if you can go to the next level and you download the free Unity and you start working with the lights in Unity, well, that's one step better, right? Because now it's less of a creative jump on the person you're applying to because they've seen you actually do it inside of a virtual environment, right? But yeah, I think that to me is the big thing. Demonstrate the passion through the portfolio.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that in terms of like you can have the red camera and you can assume that that's going to do all the work for you and fall short, or you can push what you have to the absolute breaking limits, knowing that and like get to a certain point knowing that you could have gone further and it's the other things in front of you holding you back, but it shows what you can do, kind of thing.
The other thing is that I'm a big fan. I think that was an extraordinary answer, Jordan. And I'm very much in the school of make work, just make work. For one thing, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So start now.
Exactly.
The writer, I believe it's Bradbury, the science fiction writer, Bradbury said, every writer is born with 1 million words of shit in him, and all you can do is shovel it out. One of the things that I spent so much time trying really hard to make things perfect and to be above reproach in my own chosen field, like to not make mistakes. And paradoxically, and I'm guessing Jordan's the same thing, these days I get paid for having made mistakes. Like I have stepped in on a bunch of landmines. I will charge you good money to teach you not to step on them yourself. Like literally, the mistakes are as valuable to me in my portfolio as the successes. Maybe not but if there was nothing but mistakes, that would be bad. But they're a value add now. And one of the things about, the old 10,000 hours is just buying a red camera is not worth 100 extra hours of time spent composing shots. It's
Absolutely.
It's the skill and the creating and the chance to find your voice. And the other thing I would say about that is try to be a little honest about that passion. So Jordan has heard this story before, and I'll make it quick. I may have told it once on the stream already, but the very first time I ever gave a reading was in the university where I got my degree. First time, my first book came out and I gave my first book reading. And at the end of my reading, my creative writing professor was the first question, and he held up his hand and he said, first question I ever got as a professional published writer, most people think of science fiction as the kind of thing you grow out of. Do you intend to keep writing it?
What was your answer?
What I said at the time was, I don't truly get to choose what I am passionate about. And as long as my imagination is fired by those things, I will do that. And if I find a point at which my imagination is fired by other things, then I will pursue that.
Yep.
But I think we sort of don't have a choice. Like, if you're a dork, or for that matter, you're straight-laced, or you love D&D, or you're just not a D&D person, at some sense, you just have to accept that you are who you are, because
Your own self be true. Yeah.
it must follow as the day follows the night.
Yeah.
Thou canst not be false to any man.
So the short form, Daniel, is Mickey Rooney was right. Just find a barn and put on a show.
Thank you for that, Jordan and Sean. It's always very useful. We have a lot of discussions with our peers about most of the responses we get on here specifically about that, you know, as we're about to jump into industry. It's super relevant to us, so thank you.
Wow, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, guys. I really enjoyed the talk.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming. I appreciate it so much. And thank you for knocking on my door all these years ago and telling me that there's an unguarded treasure with nothing but one very small dragon just down the road.
It's been one of the great pleasures of my life working with you the last 20 years, and I hope we get to do it for another 20. So.
Clip
Amen to that.
Show that to him when you upset him next, Sean. Alrighty, everyone.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us on this stream. Thank you, Jordan, Sean, and Daniel for coming in and having this chat. It's been great. I know there's a very anxious stage manager waiting for Daniel and Sean to get back to their tech. And I have amounts of the work that's just piled up at my doorstep during this stream. So we'll see you all next time. August 4th, we open. And yeah, we'll see you then. Bye all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. And do it one more time for me.
Oh, I take my jumper off. It's not helping. Omega switch pat. Install. Whoa. I'm Sam.
Sam. Sam.
Whoa, dude, I'm in her yurt.
No. No, no, no.
I'm in her everything.
Good. This is art right here. The thing is, it's not no. It's not no. It's now.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
No.
Are you sure they said that, or is that just something you wanted to get off your chest?
NAOU.
Okay, well, that's a bit rude.
AU.
Oh, hell. I'm Pat.
That's pretty good, right?
That's the best thing I've ever seen you do, Lee.
That was great.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
What did they say?
Oh, dude, just like